Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are the founders of Flux Pharma Services. I'm Matt Chalmers, and with me, with her boxing gloves on, is
Oh, come on, boxing gloves. I'm Rihanna Porter. How you going, everybody?
now. The reason that Bree's got her boxing gloves on is that we both attended the Pharmacy Board of Australia webinar on the compounding guidelines today, and I do know that Bree, in her quality management diligence, sent me a copy of her notes, which can only be described as aggressive.
Oh, aggressive. That's a bit over dramatic, I think.
Well, as I said to you before, as you were typing these notes, I just pictured you going through keyboards at a rate of knots with keys just flying
Yeah.
everywhere as you were
I
typing.
had to reapply
So,
a couple of times, but that's okay. It got through. I've got a good keyboard. It's used to this sort of abuse.
well, there was two sessions today. I was at one, you were at the other one.
Yep.
Obviously the same content, because it was pretty clear that they weren't really interested in taking any questions
Yeah.
during the program. Um,
I had to laugh. I had about 7 questions lined up in the Q&A box, and the guy sitting there looking at the screen going, let's see if we've got any more questions coming through. Hmm, you've got 7 questions just from me sitting there. You just don't want to answer my questions.
all right. Well, where, where do you want to start?
Let's think. I guess, well, we kind of touched on it, so we may as well start with the we don't cover. You
Right.
know, the disclaimers that were coming through today were very clear that the pharmacy board, I think they feel pressured to put out something on compounding. They do regulate pharmacists, but they've made it very clear that they didn't want to be the primary source of information for compounding. They don't want to write legislation. They don't want to make the rules for compounding, basically. They have a guidance there, and they made it very clear that it was a guidance and that it wasn't for, the be all and end all. There was a lot of reference to the APF and saying, the APF's got this information, the APF's got that information, but at the end of the day, the APF refers back to the guidelines. Like, there's a lot of, there is a lot of resources here, there, and everywhere. There's bits and pieces. I wouldn't say that there was one huge reference in Australia that covers off everything you need to know about compounding, but they everything is very cyclical, and I thought it was a bit of a cop out saying, we don't cover this, we don't cover that. They started out when you got the email when you registered. I don't know if you noticed, Matt, but when you got the email back, it said, we would like to make it very clear that we don't regulate medicines in Australia. And so we are under a TGA exemption. So the TGA, they regulate medicines, and that's clear. And we do have to comply with certain regulations from the TGA for medicines quality and advertising, all that sort of thing. But for the most part, compounders operate under a TGA exemption. So if the TGA is not regulating it because we're under an exemption, the pharmacy board's not regulating it because they don't regulate medicines, who's regulating compounding? We're back to that same thing from 2015 where everybody goes, not mine, you touched it last. So, it's the
Yeah,
same
I
old
look.
stuff.
That was one thing that I did notice. That was one thing I did notice in the beginning, and I think I looked at it. It was about 40 minutes worth of preamble that said that essentially added up
Yeah.
to this is a complicated issue and we're not having anything to do with it.
Yep.
They tried to show all the different things that you need to consider, as far as your local regulations and what their guidelines are and all these things that you have to look at. But it's
Mm.
still, even when they put it in a list like that, it still wasn't clear.
No. And
Um,
I know they even said in the presentation, we're showing you this graphic to show you how complicated it is. And I feel like it's their job to say, to give some sort of clarity on that complicated situation. We all know it's complicated. Why is it, you know, why does it fall back on the pharmacist? We've got all of these bodies and it's still complicated.
yeah, it really does need someone to just grab it by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah, 100%.
And no one's, you know, they're not even interested.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what was it,
They've shown
2008?
today.
2008, the Oceania report that said that?
Yeah,
We've known this for a
yeah,
long time.
yeah, and it was something that they really showed no interest in doing today.
No, it
Zero
was.
interest.
Well, I think it was clear even from the beginning, the actual contacting pharmacists about the forum. I went on their website when, I received the letter from a colleague, and I thought, oh, I'll go on the website and see what they've posted on the website about the forum. It's not even on their website. They've got access to the contact information and the emails for every single pharmacist in this country. Why was it not just emailed out to everybody?
Mm.
It didn't make sense to me. And if they truly wanted feedback, that's what they would have done. But, and again, they made it very clear in the forum, they're obligated to consult. And that's what this was done out of obligation more than anything. And that's definitely the vibe that I think a lot of people got. I've spoken to a couple of pharmacists since, and I think we all got that same vibe that it was just it was a forum because they have to do a forum. And they've shown that they've done something, and they've recorded that they've done something. But, I don't think anybody really came away from that feeling satisfied that their questions were answered or anything like that, or their feedback was even considered, really.
Yeah. Which pharmacists, or sorry, pharmacists from which state do you think have shown the most interest in this?
New South Wales, 100%.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are under fire at the moment. They're the ones that are really feeling the pressure from the authority, not from the pharmacy board, because they've made it very clear they don't regulate pharmacists. But, sorry, they don't regulate pharmacies, they regulate pharmacists. But the HCCC has been very active in auditing pharmacies at the moment. There was actually an article in the AJP recently that there has actually been a significant increase in complaints about compounding, but that has actually been congruent with the increase in activity. So it's not that there's more people doing things wrong, it's just that there's more activity to find people doing things wrong. But
right.
Okay. But the New South Wales guys are really feeling the pressure, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, look, from everything that I've seen, the majority of the interest in this forum has been from New South Wales.
Yeah, that's
compounders as well. I mean, I would imagine that there's probably certain compounders in certain states right now that are saying, we like everything the way it is, don't touch it, thank you.
Yeah, Queensland, and then they don't even have a pharmacy council.
Well, I wasn't going to name any states. I was just going to leave it at that.
Hey, it's a state. It's not a pharmacy. We love our Queensland pharmacists, don't get us wrong. But, really, if anybody's going to be relaxed, with all their beaches, no pharmacy council, what have they got to worry about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about professional judgment.
I told you that. I'm getting t-shirts,
because
mate.
I feel you haven't been revved up enough.
Just
I feel you haven't been revved up enough.
Fuel on that
so I'm just
fire.
going to say 2 words here. I want to say professional judgment.
Oh dear.
Let's talk about professional judgment.
Yes.
What do you think? What'd they say today?
That's a cop-out. Professional judgment. It's a way to say that we're not going to tell you what to do. You just got to work it out. With professional judgment, it definitely is the case. You're a pharmacist. You do have a professional judgment. But it seems to be everything's about professional judgment. Every answer to every question was, you need to use your professional judgment. And I know at one point they spoke about when you're deciding to compound a product, whether you go ahead with it or not, because you need to consider whether it would be accepted by the profession. Now, this is a new term that we haven't really heard much. Like, professional judgment has been thrown around for the last 15 years. That's always been the go-to phrase for, if anything, any questions, anything they're not quite sure on, it'll be, well, use your professional judgment and decide whether that's right. And look, to an extent, that's correct. You have to do a risk assessment. Like with any business, risk assessment is the key to making business decisions. Because if you're just going in willy-nilly and doing whatever, whenever, then, yeah, things are going to go wrong. And in this case, it could be patient harm. But the regulators are just constantly throwing this professional judgment at our pharmacists, and basically putting the onus on the pharmacist to justify their professional judgment as well. I read a really interesting article. It was from the business school from Trinity College in Dublin, and they were looking at the concept of professional judgment. So professional judgment, it's applying competency and knowledge and skills from a particular area to a decision. And in the scope of pharmacy, the idea that is if you have somebody applying professional judgment, it's slightly better than a lay person because they've got the knowledge. They still have personal opinions, they still have commercial interests, but a pharmacist, for example, has the specialised knowledge on top of those two things to make a professional judgment. In Australia, we are encouraged, or it's pertinent, that pharmacists act in the best interest of the patient. But, from my experience, the idea of what is actually best for the patient has varied so much. And a lot of the time it lands pharmacists in trouble. And when they were talking today saying, you need to think about it whether the profession would actually, back you up on your decision. And, I fired a few rapid fire questions at them after that one. One of which being, what determines, the profession agreeing with you? Do you need 100% of pharmacists to agree with you? Because on almost any point of pharmacy, you're going to have disagreement. It's part of the profession, and it's part of what makes it interesting, is that people do have differing opinions on certain areas. And medicines which aren't ARTG registered, which may be novel, could, that's definitely where things like this are going to occur. So would the profession accepting what you're doing be 50% of people accepting what you're doing? Would it be 80%? Would it be 10%? What determines the profession accepting what you're doing, really?
And did they put a number on that at all?
No, they didn't answer my question for that one.
No, they just said accepted by the profession.
Accepted by the profession.
That's an odd way to put that, because I've never heard of anyone who's had to, front the council or the pharmacy board or any of the health regulators in any state. I've never heard anyone say, I went in and there was 6 compounders sitting at the desk there and they were going to, deliberate over whether I had done the right thing or not.
Yeah.
It's never compounders. It's never anyone that knows anything about compounding.
No, and so these council boards,
I find that interesting.
They don't have the experts there. Even some councils, I know of one council which has a compounding expert, and they are excluded from most of these panels because of conflicts of interest. So you have nobody for compounding in there, which is scary. But on that point, I guess if you are a compounder out there and you are interested in joining the council, New South Wales council elections are coming up. Put your hand up. If you've got the time, put your hand up. Help us out.
Yeah, this whole idea of being accepted by the profession and then having absolutely no representation of this profession.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, compounding is a profession on its own. 100%. It's not a sub-profession of pharmacy. This is a profession all of its own.
Yep.
And to have no representation at all in the areas where they're making these judgments,
it's
how
scary.
can you possibly say, it's time to be accepted by the profession?
Yeah, exactly right. You're accepted by other people who have no idea what you're doing. Yeah. Really. And, the other one that they did say that I thought was interesting, when you do think you've got you've been accepted by the profession, that you document that. And that was my question they did bring up, which I'm glad that they brought up one of them.
So good. That's, because you're the Australia's queen of compounding documentation. I did really want to ask you that because that came up in my one as well. And that is, all right. Let's just put aside the fact that this is a really dumb idea to start with. Okay, let's just say that being
okay.
accepted by the profession is an absolutely it's a fine statement to make, and that we are going to document it. All right, Australia's queen of documentation in compounding. What do you suggest? What do you think that they should do in that instance?
Well, I asked them because, what are you supposed to do? I spoke to my friend George and he said it was a great idea. Like, how are you supposed to document that? And when I did bring up the question and they addressed it, I don't think they addressed it correctly, but I think they kind of missed the point of what I was asking. I don't know whether I misunderstood what they were saying initially, but, they said, oh, you need to look at, evidence for safety, evidence for efficacy, and evidence for quality, which is, the stock standard regurgitation, basically. Which is true. Any formulation you're doing, if there is concern about the formulation, you need to back yourself up 100%. You need to make sure that the ingredients are safe. You need to make sure that there is some sort of basis for what you are doing. They did also mention documenting any interactions with experts or the prescriber themselves. So if there isn't anything documented around the clinical use for what you are applying, so especially in compounding, we are often dealing with really novel situations because, if it was a widely accepted and widely known use, it's probably commercially available.
Yes.
So for compounding, we do run into a lot of situations where we don't have a documented basis for the clinical application. So in this case, we do, if you can consult with the doctor, make sure you either print out the email. So if you do it via email interaction, is probably better than anything because at least you've got the response in writing. If you don't have that, make a note of what was discussed with who, when it was discussed, and what the outcome was. This still doesn't resolve you completely. It's, with anything, there was a pharmacist that got done recently for dispensing methotrexate inappropriately. And she had consulted with a doctor that prescribed it. He ripped shreds off her, made her feel awful, and made her think that she was being stupid for questioning him. But now she's no longer a pharmacist. So it's, I'm going to say that awful word, using your professional judgment. But yeah, just any conversations you're having, write it down. Any studies that you might find, just even safety data around the actual drug itself, so MSDSs, all that sort of stuff, keep that with the compounding record every time. Would be my advice.
Okay. All right then. And I believe Bree's going to have Use Your Professional Judgment t-shirts available exclusively from the Flux Pharma website shortly.
fluxpharma.com.au. It's to go with my "if it's not written down, it never happened" t-shirts.
We can have that on the back.
Yeah. I've got a whole range sorted out. We'll have you all kitted out in no time.
All right. You want to say anything else on professional judgment?
I think I'm okay on professional judgment.
Let me ask you this: what do you think? What do you think if there was more room for mentor-mentee relationships in compounding?
Oh, we need it.
Do you think that there would be a general acceptance of being accepted by the profession if you're especially the mentee? Would that help things? Would that help the idea of this whole idea of being accepted by the profession?
I think if compounding started from the beginning, it would definitely be more widely accepted. The issue that we are coming up with compounding is that pharmacists are coming out of university with zero knowledge about complex compounding. They've said it today. When you come out with your pharmacy degree and you've been deemed competent as a pharmacist and you get your registration, you are competent to do simple compounding. That means writing out the form that's in the APF to make your salicylic acid cream or your cold creams on your glass slab with a metal spatula. Compounding is so much more complex, so much more scientific these days. There's evidence, there's quality management, there is all sorts of stuff. You deal with chemistry, actual chemistry, what pharmacists are supposed to do. But unfortunately, with the university curriculums, we aren't able to add things in without taking things out. And everything that's in there is important. So, it's how do you determine what to take out in order to put something like complex compounding in? On that note, something like a mentor-mentee relationship would be amazing for a new pharmacist, and I think that would really breed the idea that compounding is a staple in pharmacy again. It would start from the beginning, and it would train a thought process in people that this is a viable option. Lots of pharmacy students come out of pharmacy school and they just, community pharmacy is, or even, they might go wild and go into hospital pharmacy. That's their options that they see. And I know I'm on a couple of different Facebook groups for pharmacists mums even, like people that are returning to the workforce. And they go, look, I don't think community pharmacy is for me, but what can I do? And they just don't know that it's an option. And I think if we had a mentor-mentee situation, we'd have a lot more people doing the right thing, for one, because they're not just starting from scratch and trying to work it out like all of our original pharmacists did. A lot of the legacy compounders who are now, starting to retire and starting to, sell on their businesses and things like that, they had to learn it all. They had to work it out for themselves. They didn't have even guidelines. These guys started 10 years plus, 20 years before the guidelines even existed. So, why can't our new guys learn from what they have done? They've spent all this time. It's so valuable. And to see that just go by the wayside because these mentor-mentee programs don't support compounding, it's such a shame. So I think, I think if we could find some sort of mentor-mentee situation, even to the point where I know I personally put people in contact with other compounders just on a one-to-one basis because they just want somebody to bounce ideas off. They can't talk to the guy down the street because that's their competition. But how do they find another compounder to talk to who's willing to talk to them? It's just something that's, it's not there for compounders, which is sad.
Well, shout out to any potential mentors out there.
Yes, if you want to, let us know.
Let us know. Let us know, and we'll put you in touch with people that would be willing to learn from you for sure. For sure.
They're out there.
There are so many of them out there. I would think. What do you think the numbers on pharmacists are now? I mean, they talk about this number of 700 compounding pharmacies in Australia gets thrown around a bit. So let's say we're starting from that. Then the assumption is, of course, that there is at least 700 compounders in Australia.
Minimum.
But a lot of those pharmacies will have more than one pharmacist. So, 1,000, 1,200, is that a reasonable number of pharmacists in Australia?
You'd be at least that. At least.
Yeah. So then, out of all of those, there's got to be people that really need help, and there's got to be people that are really willing to help.
Because we don't get the help from the authorities, and I think that's something that highlighted today.
Well, today showed that.
Far out. They kept on harping on, we don't want to be the primary source of information. It's like, well, then what else do you want to do? Do you just want to sit there and wait until something goes wrong? That's what it sounds like. They said, we don't monitor pharmacists. We don't register pharmacists as compounding pharmacists because we don't have the resources, which is a sad state of affairs, really. If you're talking about that many pharmacists doing a particular scope of practice, there should be some sort of resource for it. but, you know, it's they basically react when they get a complaint. And that's how they work, which isn't great.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be how it is. But you've got all these new guys who just, they don't know where to turn to. And I think if we can have something to mitigate that and, you know, like I said, just learn from the experience of others. They've been there, they've seen it happen. You know, why do we need to reinvent the wheel every time?
A subject that came up a lot in today's PBA forum was the issue of CPD. Flux Pharma is a subscription service of monthly CPD for you and your staff at the one low price. Each month is a different topic in the realm of quality management in Australian compounding conditions. There is no repetition, meaning you can fulfill your CPD needs just by being a Flux Pharma member. Visit fluxpharma.com.au to join and begin your journey toward better quality management. Now, where were we? Let's change pace. Why don't we do this? Let's talk about when you can compound, because they did cover that today.
I actually really liked that part. I thought that was actually a nice section. Yeah. I give credit. I give credit where credit is due. I'm not an unreasonable person. But yeah, they did talk about, you know, when you can and can't compound. And what I thought was really interesting, they did address a question around what's right for the patient. So I know I get a lot of questions from compounders saying, okay, what determines whether I can compound something or not? What's commercially available? So, you know, one really good example is accessibility to commercial products. So if something is accessible through SAS, for example, it's not a commercial product which is on the ARTG. So it's not technically, by their definition, it's not technically commercially available, but there is a product which is manufactured which can be brought in. So they did highlight that that is an available option. They did also talk about dosing as well.
Did they clear up whether something's if you can get it via SAS, it can be compounded? Did they clear that up?
No, they didn't. They didn't go into too much detail there, but they did highlight that it's not technically commercially available because it's not on the ARTG. The Pharmacy Board guidelines frequently asked questions actually goes into that, and they talk about what commercially available actually means. And so the definition from the Pharmacy Board was commercially available products are medicines which are registered on the ARTG. So an SAS medicine, it has been manufactured in a GMP facility, but it has not been assessed by the TGA.
Right.
So we still don't have an assessment on safety. We still don't have an assessment on efficacy, or quality for that matter, from the TGA. Risk assessment wise, it is probably a safer option, you know, contamination wise, that kind of thing, if it has been manufactured in a GMP facility. But, you know, from my opinion, you still need to verify that it has actually been made under GMP. You know, there's a lot of counterfeit medication that comes into the country. So, you know, there's different risks you've got to consider.
Yeah.
Another big thing that people ask me about is dosing wise. So a classic example is vitamin D3. Right. So, you know, compounded very, very often, vitamin D3, 50,000 IU a month. You know, vitamin D you can buy lots of places, right? But you buy 1,000. So what, are you going to expect a patient to take 50 capsules once a month to get the same dose? You know, what are the other implications that come along with that? And what I did like from today was they didn't say, well, there's 1,000 IU available, they just have to take that. They actually spoke about considering what is best for your patient. So, you know, I know I personally, if my pharmacist said to me, oh yeah, you've got to take 50 capsules once a month, I would laugh in their face. I'm not an elderly person. I'm not a child. I'm not somebody with dysphagia who has an issue with swallowing capsules. But I'm not about to go and swallow 50 of the things. Can you imagine that? You'd feel so sick. That'd be freaking
Yeah,
awful.
you wouldn't eat anything.
You wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it. You
Just
go,
full of gelatin.
yeah, that's it. Exactly. You just go, nah, don't worry about it. I'll just get rickets. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah, just full of gelatin and lactose. I've had some E4M for dessert. I'm sorry, I can't do anything.
I've got images of that little kid out of The Simpsons. She goes, don't chase me, I'm full of chocolate. But it's, yeah, so I thought that was a really sane discussion, talking about the fact that you need to consider what is best for your patient. And, patient safety comes into that, and whether having 50 of a commercially available product is safer for your patient than you making it in your pharmacy. You probably need to be looking at quality management systems, for one. But at the end of the day, you just need to do what's best for your patient. Yeah, professional judgment, again. But it was, I thought it was actually quite a level. It wasn't the black and white, well, you just can't do it. Because that seems to be the default response to any compounding questions that are just too hard. Like, well, you know what? If you don't know the answer, just don't do it. And
yeah.
So I thought that.
Do you
was
not
nice.
feel though that at some stage we're going to see a raft of allergies to excipients?
Well, see, that's another one.
In certain locations.
Really interesting. So I have had.
They're going to come up like clusters. we have an allergy cluster.
Well, over 50% of adults are actually lactose intolerant. Fun fact.
Okay.
We are the only species of animal that eats or drinks milk or dairy as an adult.
Yeah, well, I'm going to check that out. I believe that.
It's just, but if you are claiming to be compounding a commercially available product because of allergies, tread lightly. Make sure you have documentation of this. I know I saw a discussion recently. I think it might have been on a Facebook page. Yeah, love my Facebook pages. They're gold mine. But they were talking about, they had other prescription medicines that they dispensed to a patient which contained lactose, and the patient had no issues there. And then all of a sudden they wanted to get something compounded because it was cheaper, and all of a sudden they have a lactose intolerance. I think this is a classic example of professional judgment steps in.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's something that could trip you up there too, is if you've been dispensing other medicines to that patient for a significant period and they happen to have the excipient that they're saying they're now allergic to.
Yes.
They've been having it from your pharmacy for, a couple of years or something like that in another preparation, then, I feel like that's an easy tripping point.
Yeah, that's it. It comes down to risk assessment. If you're doing the correct risk assessments, you will pick up on these things. If you know what you're looking for, what you're looking at, you can pick up on that sort of stuff. And, it's a pretty obvious point, but it might be something that does get missed. People just go, oh, well, the doctor said they're lactose intolerant, so I just have to do it. And it's something that comes up, and I know there's a lot of issues around doctor and pharmacist relations and tensions there and all that sort of stuff. But, I like to remind pharmacists, just because a doctor says so doesn't mean you have to. You are also a medical professional at the end of the day. A lot of pharmacists feel a lot of pressure, and, the pharmacist I brought up before with the methotrexate, she did question the doctor and he treads off her. So she went, okay, and, lost her confidence because she thought, well, if he's that strong about it, then he must be right. But, he was a GP that prescribed methotrexate, which was outside of his specialty. He did the wrong thing. He was not doing the right thing. He prescribed a daily dose of methotrexate instead of a weekly dose of methotrexate and killed a patient. So, it's not to flare up doctor-pharmacist wars or anything, but the onus is on a pharmacist as well as a doctor. Just because a doctor says so doesn't, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't mean that you are free from blame. You don't, you're not absolved is the word I'm looking for. You're not absolved because the doctor said so. So it's definitely, the allergies and things like that, it's something you have to look at with a proper professional eye. Don't just take it at face value. And because it does land pharmacists in trouble. Good pharmacists that are doing the right thing, something as simple as not checking in on a patient's actual allergies can land you in trouble.
Yeah. Okay. I actually want to go through the questions that you asked.
Sure.
How about this? How about we do it like this? I will ask the question since you kindly sent those over to me.
Sure.
I will ask the question, and then how about you tell us what you would have liked to have heard, or expand on it and what you would have liked clarified.
Sure.
So question one. Before we say that, you just heard Bree say that she loves Facebook and she's on it all the time. So if you would like to join the Flux Pharma Facebook page, just look up Flux Pharma Services on Facebook and like the page, and you will be able to find Bree there most of the time. Okay.
I'll be on Messenger.
Question one. Question one. How are stakeholders for stakeholder meetings identified?
Yes. So this one I did bring up because in the past there's been guidelines like this written with no knowledge of compounders, no knowledge of other stakeholders within the industry. For us, we're not pharmacists, so we're not going to get direct communication from AHPRA because we are registered as pharmacists. We are stakeholders. So how are they determining who stakeholders are? How are they making sure that they get a good distribution throughout our industry to decide on what is correct? The APF, they recently did an update, and that was a classic example of what can go wrong if you don't have the right stakeholders. So, I think most pharmacists would know about the expiry debacle that's happened because they didn't consult the right people. So I wanted to know how the pharmacists...
Do you want to just give us the 30-second rundown on the expiry thing in case someone's listening and they don't know?
Okay.
Give it 30 seconds, all right?
Oh, only 30?
Ready?
You're no fun.
Yeah, ready, go.
Okay, so APF 25... Okay, how fast can I say it? And basically they had changed the section on expiry dates, limiting almost every formulation to 28 days unless you had an exact stability study. So that meant exact ingredients, exact bases, and exact storage conditions, packaging, everything exact. And that basically took out the ability of pharmacists to use their professional judgment, their knowledge of pharmacology, their knowledge of pharmacokinetics, and chemistry, things like that, to determine appropriate expiry dates. And also their ability to use other references as well, such as the USP, which does give general guidance on applying expiry dates for different dose forms, which I might add does include expiry dates which are shorter than 28 days.
Right.
But there was only I think there was maybe 4 compounding people that were actually consulted for the APF, 2 of which were from wholesalers. One was from a hospital who I will take my hat off to the hospital contributor because he's very knowledgeable on international standards. And then the fourth was a GMP owner. So he's not actually in a compounding pharmacy. So, there was basically the pharmacy world went up in arms about the fact that it was restricted to 28 days. We had especially capsules were reduced where they were being applied. 6 months was being applied previously because they're basically powder. There's a few different stability conditions that you do need to consider, but that power was taken away from them. So 28 days. From 6 months to 28 days, no explanation. So,
Right.
but there was a few
Okay.
few compounders that came back and stood up for it. And so the APF has, they've been really great in working with this group of compounding pharmacists and reviewing that section. They did add in that you can do up to 6 months on capsules, but there's still a bit more work to do.
Right. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Question 2, there is a lot of discrepancy state to state, even with lots of sharing of information. Will the board work with state authorities to make this uniform?
So I asked this because they did have a representative from the VPA discussing the regulation of premises, and he did mention that there was lots of consultation between states. They, talk to the pharmacy board on a regular basis. They talk to each other on a regular basis. But on a state-by-state basis, the rules are so different. The level of regulation is so different. We talked about before how New South Wales is on high alert right now because, I think I would be scared to be a compounder in New South Wales right now, to be honest. But then you've got, Queensland doesn't have a pharmacy council. Western Australia has their own version of the TGA. It's all very, very different. It's all so different, but we're not that big of a country, Population-wise, we've got 25 million people, and we're behaving like we're a country like the US. It's got 52 different states. I think we should really have a uniform set of rules, and the pharmacy board to me would be the obvious option to put that out, but they obviously have no interest in doing so.
I certainly showed that today. Question 3 we covered early on. What kind of documentation do you need to justify the profession agreeing with your decision? Do you want to say anything else about that, or we just move on?
I think we'll move on. That was good. Okay. Don't want to get me going again.
Yeah. All right then. Definition of batch preparation.
Yeah, so I
and then you clarify further. Are you saying multiple units of issue for one named patient or multiple named patients?
So I put this one in, and I did get an answer privately on the chat from them on this one, but I put this in because when the presenter read out the definition of what a batch is, he said it was multiple units of issue for a named patient. Now, to me, that sounded like you were doing multiple units of issue for one person. But, I know plenty of places do it, and legally so. If you've got a bunch of prescriptions for the same product, you make them together. So, the response I got was, batch compounding has risks, but it's up to the pharmacist to decide. However, you can only compound a batch for the prescriptions received, in brackets named patients, and not prior to the prescription being received. That is what the therapeutic goods legislation sets out. Now, I'm aware of what the therapeutic goods legislation sets out, but that was different from what the presenter said. So that was that reasoning for that question, and I think they kind of missed the point of my question. But it's, I think what they did mean was that if you have a batch, a batch would be multiple patients, but all with prescriptions, all named patients. And that was something that they really did drill home today as well, was that, for compounding, you need to have a named patient.
Yeah. Do you think that they're putting together the ideas of batch preparation and preparation in anticipation?
They did touch on preparation in anticipation. They brought it up, and
I just wonder if they're conflating the two ideas there.
They basically eliminated, they basically said, you just can't. Anticipation is...
Unless you're in South Australia.
Yeah. So, that's the pharmacy board. What do you mean unless you're in South Australia?
No, there was a fella from South Australia that got on and said that they do that there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
we might look at that and clarify that
yeah,
in time
that's
for the
interesting.
next Flux Cast.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was something that came up
Did he
in my afternoon meeting.
did he just get himself in trouble by saying that he did
I
that?
think he said that. I don't know.
Are they
Maybe.
tracking his IP address as we speak?
Yeah, maybe I got that wrong. Maybe I got that wrong. I got to tell you, the listening to these things is not my forte, and and that was like towards the end, and I kind of checked out by then. I'll be completely honest. Okay, APF 25 guidance is very limited and has removed the use of professional judgment.
Yeah, so for expiry dates, they actually suggested that they remove that from the pharmacy board guidelines altogether because the APF covers it.
Even though the APF has erroneously covered it just
Correct.
recently.
Correct. So that
Which
one,
they
that,
even
I
said
guess
that
that one probably
they
wasn't so much a question as I just wanted them to know my feedback on that one because yeah, there's no question there. Like
I
I
must
just,
admit it is all in all caps.
it is not. You're such a liar. People
Okay.
are going to avoid me on the street now. You know that, right?
All right. Using USP chapters for BUD guidance is irrelevant unless the practice standards within the chapters are mandated. These BUD guidelines rely on the use of standards of practice outlined.
Correct. So
Yeah.
it's BUD, USP. USP was brought up multiple times throughout the forum and
Hmm.
in different contexts. But, they talked about USP in regards to quality. They talked about USP in regards to expiry dates. But there was no mention of USP in regards to practice standards. USP comprehensively covers best practice standards for compounding. They have a they have a panel of experts, they have a panel of stakeholders who regularly review these standards. Um, and it's been brought up time and time again throughout the years and throughout the discussions of the changing in legislation and not legislation so much changing in guidelines and things like that. That
Hmm.
why don't we just use USP? They cover off a lot more than any of the standards we have.
Hmm.
Um, and you can't just pick and choose. I think something that does get missed a lot is that USP is an all-encompassing standard. You know, the guidelines that they give on BUDs, they haven't just gone, oh, yep, test the wind, that's the way it goes. You know, this is based on the assumption that the products have been compounded in a way that meets best practice standards, that they've been
Hmm.
compounded to minimize contamination, they've been stored appropriately, that they've been, all of this stuff that contributes to the quality of a product. And, you know, that comes back to, I did my first reel this week, it was a bit exciting. But what it was about was, quality management touches everything. And I think that's what the pharmacy board and APF to an extent have missed with USPs, that you can't just pick and choose out of the USP what bits you use. It needs
Hmm.
to be all or none. You can't apply those BUD guidances unless you are applying the best practice standards as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah,
Okay.
something that it's a big document and it needs to be covered in full to be able to be utilised.
Last one is a real change of pace. If payments are not within the board's remit, who are the appropriate regulators to refer to? Now, are you talking about payments for medicines?
Yeah, so this is in regards to third party arrangements.
Hmm.
So they did bring up the third party arrangements in the presentation,
Yep.
and they made a point of saying it's not our job to worry about payments. Yeah, but you and I both know this is such a big question when it comes to these arrangements. It's not about the counselling, the risk assessment. You know, I know plenty of pharmacists who get caught because of the direction of the money.
Hmm.
So who is actually, I would love to know who are the people that you talk to know what to do in regards to payments, because
Yeah.
it's such a sticking point, and people don't want to be in closed loop arrangements. Pharmacists don't want to do the wrong thing, well, the good ones anyway. But 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 they just, who are you supposed to talk to? Everybody just goes, it's not my job. So whose job is it? And can we get some clear distinction on what is expected here? And it was a real common theme for today was that, everything's self-assessment. Everything is reactive. It's, you guys just deal with your stuff until something goes wrong, then we'll step in.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also not going to tell you what the right stuff to do is.
Yeah.
So it's just, it feels like such a trap for a lot of pharmacists. It's like, just jump and see how high we think you should go.
Well, there's a former compounder that we both know that quite often says that that no one will ever say what you can or cannot do. They just say you do it, and then we'll tell you after whether you're in trouble or not.
Yeah, exactly right. That's it.
Yeah.
It's personal belief of mine that the initial guidelines were very vague, and they were vague so that they could be rolled up and used as a blunt instrument, basically.
Yeah.
So which it shouldn't be the case. The pharmacy board obviously puts time into doing these things. It's such a waste not to do it properly and not to give the appropriate guidance or the guidance that these guys need. If the pharmacy board, like the people that they registered themselves with, isn't going to help them, who's going to help them?
Yeah.
Like, it's
all right.
It's disappointing.
Let's finish on this.
Okay.
What are your predictions for what's going to come about from today's sessions? I mean, they said that they're going to open up for consultation.
Yeah.
People, we know what the general feeling of the industry is around that.
Yeah.
What's your prediction as far what's going to happen next after consultation?
We won't see anything before Christmas. We're October. We're October, and they already have on their timeline that it'll be implemented somewhere in 2022. So, don't be watching your inboxes too closely, guys. But, won't be till next year. We won't see anything, and I don't see a whole lot of change happening. I was already wondering in 2019 when they were considering reviewing, because, the document itself has a review date of 2020. And 2020 was the year that was. But, there was no mention until the end of 2021 that they were even considering reviewing it.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't be holding my breath. And I don't see a huge amount of changes happening, to be honest.
What are your top 3 things that you would like to see addressed? Let's say in a bright and shiny world that we might actually see some changes. Question without notice. What are your top 3 things
that's not fair at all.
that you would like to see altered for the better?
Oh, God. I think there needs to be clarification of scope. I think that would be great to see. It was something that was actually included in the new version of the USP. They actually discussed the types of products that they have included. I would like to see more focus on sterile medicines. But also, reference to, USP would be great. I think that would be a smart move on the pharmacy boards. It takes so much work out for them. It's already done. But in saying that, it gives a lot of pharmacists further clarification on questions that they have. It goes into more detail for each section. It's like a 460-page document. It's a huge book.
Yeah.
Rather than, I think it's 8 pages of pharmacy board guidelines.
Yeah.
Let them stay as guidelines. If that's what they want, let them stay as guidelines, but let them refer to things like USP, which will help them, which will give them more guidance. And, I think that's what we need to be seeing, more specific guidance, not just where appropriate, use your professional judgment. It's so open to interpretation, and a lot of pharmacists are scared because it is open to interpretation.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see. Was that 3? I think that was
Okay.
3.
That's good enough. That's good enough. All right. Well, thanks, Bree. Thanks for your time tonight. Look, I apologise to anyone that might have heard, my two dogs having a wrestle upstairs or the kitchen noises or anything like that. We are recording this the night of the webinar, so
That
there's
lockdown life.
some house noises going on. Yeah, that lockdown life, house noises going on. So if anyone, if that comes through, I do apologise. But look, thanks, Bree. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Great chatting as always.
That was great, and we'll catch you next time. See you later.
Talk soon.